Shalom, everyone. Shalom, 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 and welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus, or Answering Jewish Objections to Yeshua, class number 1 of, not sure yet how many classes there are going to be, but I can tell you for sure that until further notice, this class will take place every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That is 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And every week we'll review an objection that Jewish people have to accepting Yeshua, to receiving Yeshua, to recognizing Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, Yeshua, as the Jewish Messiah and the Savior of the world. There are many obstacles, hindrances that Jewish people face when it comes to accepting him, and we're going to go through those. We're going to go through them methodically, probably 1 or 2 per week in this class. So mark your calendars. You may or may not, on Facebook, on your social media, get a reminder. You never know how these news feeds work these days, right? So just mark thy calendars, mark your own calendars, that every Tuesday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, there'll be a class for answering Jewish objections to Jesus. So welcome. Welcome, welcome. Let me just take a quick check on social media just to make sure that everybody is here. All right, does everybody see me? I'm seeing a comment that from Carol that she can't see me. Is that the case? Can I get some level of assurance from you folks out there in television land that you could see me okay? How's everything looking? How's everything sounding? All right, everybody loved the intro music, so that's great. That's a really good start. I'm glad that everybody appreciated that music. All right, so I'm going to trust that everything is working okay, and we are going to start our class by way of introduction. I am Rabbi Brian Samuel of Congregation Mishkan David Messianic Jewish Synagogue in North Smithfield, Rhode Island. I am a Messianic Jew, which is a Jewish believer in Jesus. Hey, how about that? Jewish people can believe in Yeshua and believe he is the Messiah. You know, if you're local to us in Rhode Island, feel free to celebrate with us. If you're not part of another congregation already, just come and visit every Saturday. We meet in North Smithfield, Rhode Island. In person, you can come and celebrate with us, or if you're not local, you can celebrate with us online. We're virtual every Shabbat. We're live streaming every Shabbat. My email address is on the screen, and I became a little bit of an expert in pointing to it. Here. So feel free to email me at rabbi@messianicri.com with any questions, comments you have about this class. I would love to hear from you. So definitely please reach out to me. And if you want to even send me a comment on the Facebook page that you're watching, I'm the one that oversees and manages that Facebook page. So I will see your comments. And I'm happy to receive all of them. And I'm just grateful for everyone who's joining the class. I'm not sure how many people will be watching, but I could tell you in the Facebook event that I created, we got about 130 or 140 responses of interest. And not just the local yokels here with me in New England, but all around the country and even around the world. Even got some interest in the land of Israel. So from wherever you're watching, I'm grateful that you're here. Feel free to type in the comments where you're from. I won't be able to read the comments too much during the class while I teach, but I'm sure everybody else that's watching would love to meet you, would love to say hi to you. So feel free to put in the comments where you're watching from. And share this video if you feel that your Facebook friends would appreciate watching this video, this class on answering Jewish objections to Jesus. Feel free to just click that share button and send it out there. So just by way of history and what prompted this class here, answering Jewish objections to Jesus, this class for me is very special. It's literally 25 years in the making. And let me explain what I mean by that. And let me give you a bit of a testimony and explain why I feel like I have a level of qualification in teaching this class, and I have a level of capability when presenting this class. So, as I said, I am Jewish. Most of my life, this testimony and some history to this class, most of my young life, I was an atheist. Now, I'm Jewish, but I grew up and I didn't have really a concept of faith. I didn't really believe in God. In fact, both my parents were self-proclaimed atheists, which is interesting. Now, if you're not from a Jewish background, that may not make sense to you. Like, how can you say that you're Jewish but not have faith? Isn't the religion of Judaism linked with the faith of Judaism. Like, how can you say you're a Christian but not believe in Christ? It's not that way in Judaism, because Judaism is not just a religion, but it's an ethnicity as well. It's a national identity as well. So a Jewish person can be an atheist and even believe in another religion entirely, but still have a strong connection to being Jewish as an ethnicity. And that is the environment I grew up in. Not strong Jewish faith, but a strong tied to my ethnicity as being a Jew. Well, I met my wife, Sue, hi Sue, in 1995, and Sue was and is a Christian, and we started to date in 1995, and we started to look for ways where we can integrate our backgrounds, our faiths. You know, we remember having this conversation of like, how do we integrate her faith in Jesus with my Jewish background and my Jewish culture? Like, how do we integrate Passover with Jesus, right? Not knowing even at that time that the Last Supper was a Passover Seder and Jesus kept that holiday himself. But we were just pondering, like, how do we integrate my Judaism, my sense of being a Jew, and my passion and zeal for wanting to keep that with her faith and her love for the Lord. So we remember going into the internet. This is back in like 1995, maybe 1996 by now. And I remember going to the Yahoo search engine. And this was probably when Yahoo was brand new. I think the internet was pretty new. And I remember exactly what I typed in. I typed in Judaism with a plus sign, and then Christianity, Judaism plus Christianity. And out popped this thing called Messianic Judaism. And as a Jew, it intrigued me. It spoke about how Jesus was actually Jewish and all his followers, his disciples, were Jews. And they didn't stop being Jewish. They didn't come together to form a new religion. And even after Yeshua died and rose, all the apostles that came after, at least in the New Testament, were all Jewish. And they all kept their Jewish identity. And it was never, like I said, to start another religion. That whole thing really intrigued me. That whole concept intrigued me. So it was in the Messianic Jewish synagogue when I first accepted the Lord. And Sue and I then were unified in our faith. So we started to attend the Messianic Jewish synagogue. This was in New Jersey. And I thought everything was great. All was going to be well. And I went to my parents, mom and dad. Guess what? I accepted Yeshua. He's the Jewish Messiah. Now, I always knew that it's a little bit hard for a Jew to receive and recognize Jesus. There's a lot of history there, and there's a lot of contention there. And these are the things that we're going to talk about in this class, little by little. I knew it was challenging. I even felt it in myself as I was presented with the gospel message. But I didn't realize how challenging it would be. My parents just exploded all over us. It was not an easy time at all. Just to give some background, not to cast judgment or anything like that. My relationship with my mother is just fine. My father, of blessed memory, has passed, but we always had a very good relationship. But my mother did not come to our wedding. My grandmother did not come to my wedding. My father did not come to the wedding. So that's the type of contention that I experienced, and that is not uncommon. And I want you to know that. It's not uncommon for a Jewish person that does accept Jesus, that does come to faith in Yeshua, to receive that type of backlash from family. I was receiving comments from my mother saying, like, how can you accept a faith that our Jewish ancestors died for rejecting? Like, our ancestors had a knife in their throat by Christians saying, convert or die. And our ancestors chose death over forced conversion. And you're accepting that willingly? These are tough questions. And these are tough sentiments that Jewish people face when they're faced with the gospel. And we're going to go over those things. Notably in this class, we're going to go over just that. So I got that type of backlash from my family, but also I got a sort of a religious backlash, and let me explain what happened. They wound up contacting groups that are called Counter-missionaries. Anybody here that's watching ever hear of groups called Counter-missionaries or Anti-missionaries? Maybe you've never heard of them. If you're Jewish, you might have heard of them for sure. Like, for instance, you may have heard of the evangelical group, Jews for Jesus. It's an organization of Jewish people that believe that Jesus is the Messiah, and they evangelize, right? We've heard of Jews for Jesus. Well, there's an anti-missionary group, and they're called Jews for Judaism. Jews for Judaism. There's another one called Outreach Judaism, and that's exactly the one that my parents reached out to, and they went to them and said, help! My son became a Christian. My son accepted Jesus. What do we do? Groups like that, Jews for Judaism, Outreach Judaism, their intent, their mandate, their directive is to take Jews like me who've accepted Yeshua and bring us out, take us out of Christianity, take us out of a Messianic Jewish setting and bring us back into traditional Judaism. And they employ several tactics to do that. They will counter, firstly, our faith with theological points that are actually pretty good points, and they're really challenging to counter. They'll say things like Isaiah 53 is not about the Messiah, can't be about the Messiah, and they'll explain why they feel that Isaiah 53 can't be about Jesus. And we know that's very foundational in our faith, right? He was pierced for our transgressions. How can that be about anybody but Jesus, we may say? Well, they say, nope, it's about Israel, and here's why. And they'll present a case about it. A case on that. They'll go to Isaiah 7, which is a very foundational verse in our faith. It says a virgin will give birth to a child, right? And his name will be Emmanuel, and that means God is with us. And we see that as a prophecy of the birth of Yeshua. And it's even mentioned in the Gospels. And they'll say, no. First of all, that is not about the birth of the Messiah. It's about something else, number one. Number two, the Christian Bible, the New Testament, misquotes the Hebrew. It doesn't even say virgin. It says young woman. So they'll bring these types of challenges to our faith. They'll talk about the New Testament, and they'll show all the areas that the New Testament, quote unquote, misquotes the Old Testament. They'll say that the New Testament is actually anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic, and it teaches people to hate Jews. And then it'll go into cultural challenges that Jewish people have, and they'll present that, and they'll present cases like that, like you can't accept that, like our ancestors looked at the case of Jesus being the Messiah, and Judaism has rejected it, so why are you accepting this? You know, they'll bring that level to it, and also just from a guilt perspective, how can you do that? How can you accept what our ancestors died for rejecting? So my family contacted these groups, and now all of a sudden I was getting immersed in all of their literature and forced to read it. And this was challenging for me. I was brand new to the faith, literally brand new. And all of a sudden, I'm getting overwhelmed with all of these materials disproving the Messiahship of Jesus. That was the last thing I needed as a young person in the faith. But I had to, because I had to answer my family. And I dug into it, and all of a sudden I started to poke holes. And all of a sudden I started to look at some of their conclusions, say, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not what the Torah says. That's not what the Bible says. And they'll speak about the faith, and they'll say, no, that's really not, I'll think that's not really what the faith is all about. That's not what the New Testament says, what they say it says. And I started to poke holes in some of their arguments. And I just started to type, and I started to write, and I started to document, and I started to collect all of these papers that I wrote to disprove these counter-missionaries. In fact, early on, I thought that was going to be a ministry. I thought, as a person that was a believer for, 3.5 minutes, I thought that God gave me, a new ministry, like my first and only ministry. And I even gave it a name. If they were the counter-ministries, I'm going to be countering the if they were counter-missionaries, I'm going to be countering the counter-missionaries. That was going to be the name of my ministry, to counter the counter-missionaries. And I started to write. But you know what? Sometimes when you're a young believer, you have to just kind of take a step back, and you need to grow in your faith in a simple way. You just need to commune with God and connect with God and connect with other people of like-minded faith. And don't get into this battle. There's a story in Torah that I can liken it to. When the children of Israel first came out of Egypt, and they were delivered by God, and they came through the sea, and the water went over the Egyptians, and they were free. In their first few days of being out of slavery, they almost entered into war with the Philistines. But God, in his wisdom, took them the long way around. They actually avoided war. And why did he do that? Because they were just delivered from slavery. The last thing that these new free nation, this newly freed nation, the last thing they needed was to go into war. They were just delivered from slavery. They were tired. They were hungry. They didn't need that. So God, in his wisdom, moved them around that area of the Philistines so they would avoid war. And what can we learn from that? We can learn that when we're new in the faith, we can avoid these contentious dialogues and these contentious discussions and heated arguments about the faith. And that's where God had me. So I had to take a step back from all of that. Well, it's been 25 years. And here we are. And now here we are 25 years later. And I am blessed and I'm honored really to bring you this class. I view this class as the culmination of all of that I wrote 25 years ago, the culmination of literally decades of studying this type of material, the culmination of trying to understand why it is so difficult for Jewish people to accept Yeshua, Jesus as the Messiah, and to bring clarity and answer to those questions. I do believe this class is the fulfillment of that vision that I had 25 years ago, that this was going to be a bit of a ministry. But rather than writing a book, here I am doing something called a live stream, which wasn't invented back then, and this is going to be it. So this entire class, whether it's tonight or next week or however long this goes, it's all going to be on a YouTube playlist. Everything is going to go on a playlist, and that's where it's going to live perpetually, in a YouTube playlist. And I'll be able to share the link to that playlist in the comments once this class is over. So you'll always be able to go back and see it. By the way, if you are looking for a book, if you are a reader, I have to recommend Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus by Dr. Michael Brown. I am a big fan of Michael Brown. He's a very centered believer. He talks often about political things from a very, very rational and centered point of view, which I very much appreciate. And he wrote a 5-volume set of answering Jewish objections to Jesus, from theological objections to biblical objections to cultural objections. This is really the most authoritative, comprehensive, exhaustive collection you will find pertaining to this topic. So after this class, I will also post the link to Amazon.com where you can buy any of his 5 books, Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus. Just because my class shares the same title as his books, it doesn't mean that I'm just teaching from those books. I do want to make that point. The things that I'll be teaching is really from my own experience and from my own learnings that I'm bringing to you, but I do glean from these books. So it is a reference for me, so I do want to give him the credit for that. And Dr. Michael Brown's book is top-notch when it comes to this. So what are we going to go over in this class? So this class is class 1. It's introductory primarily, and we will go over a Jewish objection to Jesus in this class today. But we're going to go over every week. We will review 1 or 2 obstacles, challenges that Jewish people face when they're faced with the truth of the Messiahship of Jesus. Why is it so difficult? And we're going to go over these things slowly. We're going to go over, like I said, 1 or 2 every class. It might be a general objection like, you can't be a Jew and believe in Jesus, period. It could be an historical objection, like the Messiah in Jewish thought is supposed to bring peace on earth, but we don't see peace on earth. Look what's happening in Russia right now. We don't see peace on earth. So how can he be the Messiah when the Messiah is supposed to bring peace, right? The wolf and the lamb will lie down together. The sword will be beaten into plowshares. Those are messianic prophecies. According to Judaism, hasn't happened. How can Jesus be the Messiah? There are some other theological objections that we're going to go through, very serious ones. How can Jesus be God? How can he be divine when the Bible, the Old Testament, explicitly says God is not a man? And here is Christianity saying this man that walked is God. How do we marry that? How do we answer that? That is a really good question, and we have to be able to answer that. If a Jewish person will challenge us with that, there has to be an answer, right? And we're going to go through that over the course of this class. How can God be 3 when the Bible explicitly says that God is 1? Adonai Echad, God is 1. How can he be 3 if he's 1? These are the things we're going to go over. These are the challenges and the objections that Jewish people have, and we're going to go over how to answer those objections. This class is a defense of the Messiahship of Yeshua. I do want to give a caveat out there, and please don't misunderstand me, and please don't be offended by what I'm about to say. This is a defense of Yeshua, of Jesus. This is not a defense of all aspects of Christianity. As we look at the Jewish arguments against Christianity, we are going to be really looking at some of these deeply held beliefs and maybe challenging some of them as well. So I just want to give you a caveat, a heads up, a warning that all of the Orthodox Christian theology, it's not like this is a defense of that. Some of that is going to be challenged a little bit as well. So just be prepared for that in advance. My prayer for this class is Jewish people will see this. They will consider the claim that Yeshua is the Messiah, that Yeshua is the Savior of the world. He is HaMashiach, the Messiah that our people are waiting for. And there is nothing more Jewish than following the Jewish Messiah. If he is the Messiah, if Yeshua is the Messiah, then there's nothing more Jewish than following him. My prayer is that if there are Jewish people like I was that are being drawn to Yeshua, they feel that pull, they want to accept him. It's registering in their spirit, in their mind that they want to do it, but they are experiencing pushback and blowback from their family, and they're feeling maybe some guilt from the millennia of this strong Jewish identity, that if you accept Jesus, you're going to lose your Jewish identity. I pray that if there are Jewish people that are in that situation like I was, that they would receive comfort and blessing from these videos and feel secure that you can believe in the Jewish Messiah and fully maintain your Judaism, your Jewish identity. You don't need to lose that. You don't need to give up your knishes and your gefilte fish for a pork chop. Okay, you don't have to. And I do pray that Jewish people will see this and just recognize that Yeshua is the Messiah that our people are waiting for. I do pray that Christians will see this and are inspired. I pray that Christians are inspired, Gentile Christians will be inspired to rekindle their connection to the Jewish roots of the faith. In the first century when the faith in Yeshua was just forming at the time of the disciples and the time of the apostles, there was such an integration with Judaism. There was such an integration between that faith. In fact, it was actually a Jewish faith. It was one of the Jewish sects of the first century. We know about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Well, the Christians or the Nazarenes, this was a sect in Judaism. And one of the big differences between our sect of Judaism and the other traditional sects of Judaism is that Gentiles are invited to come in and partake of the fullness of what God has to offer without conversion to Judaism. And that was the big delineating difference. But there was always a connection to Judaism in the first century faith. And that has been broken over the thousands of years. That has been broken, often intentionally. We're going to go through that a little bit. And my prayer is to see that connection kind of be reestablished between Gentile Christians and Jewish people, and just to know that they are one, that they're one new man together, as the Bible says. These days in this generation, we're seeing a partnership between Judaism and Christianity like never before. And that's such a blessing that we have groups like Christians United for Israel, CUFI, or International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. This is a new phenomenon. It hasn't happened for 2,000 years. It is a work of God, this unification that we're seeing between Christianity and Israel, Christianity and Jewish people. My prayer that continues and becomes more real. I pray that Christians recognize that it is important to God for Jewish people to come to faith in Yeshua, and that actually Jewish people coming to faith in Yeshua is connected to his coming. It says in Romans 11, it says, if the Jewish people's rejection proved to be salvation for the world, so if God's rejection of Israel proved to be salvation for the world, if that's what brought the world salvation, it says, how much more will their acceptance or their reacceptance be? But life from the dead. So does anybody here on this call want life from the dead? Life from the dead is resurrection. That's what's associated with the second coming, with Yeshua's coming, the resurrection of the dead. And it says that life from the dead is connected to the acceptance of Jewish people. So the acceptance of Jewish people, or Jewish people accepting Yeshua, is absolutely linked to his second coming, which is what everybody wants. Jews and Christians, they all want the Messiah to come and right what's wrong in this world. And that is connected to the Jewish people. Even Yeshua himself said, you won't see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So we want to see Israel. We want to see more and more Jewish people say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And I pray that this class brings reconciliation. Reconciliation is something that's near and dear to my heart. I hate to see people groups have division between them. We were given, it says, the ministry of reconciliation. It says that in the New Testament. And the wall of partition, the wall of division was broken down. It says that in Ephesians 2, that wall separating Jew and Gentile is destroyed in Yeshua, and we become one new man. That's reconciliation. And I just pray that the Christians that are watching this, Gentile Christians, are awakened to that reality that one new man is not just the Protestants and the Lutherans getting together, it's Jew and Gentile getting together. And my prayer is that is manifest more and more and more. I pray that Jews do not see Christians as an enemy, because so many people do, so many Jewish people do, but as a sincere friend and partner, and Christians to see Jews not as just some other religious group, but as co-heirs, as it says in the New Testament, co-heirs to the promises of God. The primary, objection that Jewish people have as we start to get into the material is this overarching objection that you can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. A Jewish person who has accepted Yeshua or accepted Jesus or considering it will get that answer almost all the time, quote unquote. You can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. And I've gotten that many, many times. There was an event that I was publicizing, a congregational event, and I advertised it, right? So it advertised on Facebook outside of the congregation, and a lot of Jewish people saw it. And I kept getting those types of answers. You can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. I got that from the Jewish side. I got that from the Christian side. You can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. So that statement right there is flawed in many, many ways. First of all, to be a Jew is not just a faith, number one, as we said. It's also an ethnicity. So if, like, my parents can be atheists and consider themselves Jews, then I can believe in Jesus and consider myself a Jew, right? So if it is both an ethnicity, which can't be broken, and a faith, then you can't really say you're no longer a Jew. That whole concept of saying you're not a Jew is actually impossible. So I speak to you Jewish people, my fellow Jewish people, who think that they're not going to be Jewish if they accept Jesus. It's not the case. Losing your Judaism is absolutely impossible. You will always be a Jew. You'll be born a Jew and you'll die a Jew. It was the same with Yeshua himself was a Jew. It was the same with the apostles like Paul, who said he is a Jew, not was a Jew, from Tarsus. So you will always keep your Judaism. But when somebody says you can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus, what they're saying is, okay, you're Jewish. I get it. You're Jewish by ethnicity, but you're an apostate. And I get that all the time as well. And I got that even in that Facebook event, like I was sharing with you, that I publicized and promoted. You're an apostate. You're Jewish, okay, but you're an apostate. And what they mean by that is essentially this. They're saying that there are tenets of the Christian faith, beliefs in the Christian faith, tenets, doctrines, creeds that are incompatible with Jewish thought, period. That's what they're saying. That if you believe these sets of Christian doctrines and Christian creeds, you cannot be practicing Judaism. This is the challenge that we will get, and these are the things we're going to go over in this class. So hold on to your seat, or hold on to your hat, whatever the expression is, or hold on to your seat and your hat, and it's going to be a wonderful, inspiring, challenging, but edifying ride that we're on. So what they're saying is that you can't practice certain Christian or believe certain Christian doctrines and still say you're a Jew, that those are mutually exclusive things. And like I said, we're going to challenge that. But the truth is, there can't be anything more Jewish than believing in the Jewish Messiah. So really, the question is not about can you be Jewish and believe in Jesus. The question is, who is Yeshua? Is he who he says he is? Because if he is the Messiah, and Judaism believes that a Messiah is going to come. It's one of the 13 articles of faith in Judaism, that we believe with perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah. And though he tarries, we wait for him. That was from Maimonides. That's the 13 articles of Jewish faith. So Jewish people believe in the coming of the Messiah. If the Messiah is Yeshua, then it is Jewish to believe in him, period. It is Jewish to believe in him, period. In fact, there's nothing more Jewish than to come under the covering and have the Messiah actually be your teacher, your Lord. There's nothing more Jewish than that if he is the Messiah. So it's not a matter of you can't be Jewish. The question really resolves to, is Yeshua the Messiah? That is the question that needs to be answered. Is he the Messiah? And the reality is, as I shared, in the New Testament, being Jewish and believing in Jesus was the norm, not the exception. In this time, it's the exception and not the norm. But in the beginning, being Jewish and believing in Jesus were completely compatible. In fact, it says in one place in Acts 21:30, it says, you see, talking to Paul, how many thousands, the Greek actually says myriads, how many thousands there are among the Jews who have believed. And they are all, it says, Acts 21:20, zealous for the law, or zealous for Torah. That means that thousands upon thousands of what in modern terms would be Orthodox Jews believed. How many thousands believed, and they were all zealous for the law. So the question in the New Testament was never, how can you be Jewish and believe in Jesus? Or you can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. The Judaism was never questioned. In fact, one of the primary questions in all of the New Testament is not how do you be a Jew and believe in Jesus, it's how do you be a Gentile and believe in Jesus, because the faith in Jesus welcomed in people from the nations, and then the Jewish apostles had to say, okay, what do we do about this? What do they have to keep the law? Do they have to get circumcised? Do they got to give up their pork chops? What do they have to do? And that was a big theme, a large theme in the New Testament. It's not how can a Jew believe in Jesus? It's how can a Gentile believe in Jesus? That is the primary theme in the New Testament. So knowing that, there must be a synergy between Judaism and faith in Yeshua. There must be an interlocking compatibility that is seamless and perfect, and I tell you that it is. One of the objections that we get in Judaism is that Jews rejected Jesus. And we get that from both sides. The Jews rejected Jesus. That is a lie. There's always been Jewish people that believe that Jesus was the Messiah. In fact, Jesus said himself in Matthew 5, he said, do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. What does that mean? The law and the prophets, those are the foundations of the Jewish faith, right? The Torah and the prophets is the Old Testament. That's the foundation, the core. And he's saying, I didn't come to abolish that. I came to fulfill it. In other words, I didn't come to start a new religion. Listen to me. I did not come to, this is what he means. This is what Matthew 5:17 says. I did not come to start a new religion. I've come to bring the fullness of what Judaism has, what Judaism is meant to be. Judaism is its thing, and it has its flaws for sure. And I have come, this is Yeshua saying, to bring the fullness of what the faith in God is meant to be. It's not to start a new religion, it is to bring the fullness of what he already started. The faith started with Abraham, it went to Moses, it went to David, it went to the prophets. Jesus didn't come and say, okay, let's cut that off and we're going to start a new religion. It's to bring the fullness of the Jewish faith, which incorporates everyone in the world. My previous rabbi in New Jersey used to say it's a Jewish faith for the whole world. So let's continue on here. And we're going to go to our first Jewish objection to Jesus. And, I'm sorry to get sidetracked again. I just want to bring up one other thing. There's a story of Joseph, and most people who are watching this that are familiar with the Bible may know the story of Joseph. I want you to know that Joseph is a type and shadow of Jesus, of Yeshua. Whether you're from a Christian background or from a Jewish background, I want you to know that story of Joseph is a foreshadow of Yeshua, of Jesus. Joseph was the brother of the Jews, right? His brothers were the 12 tribes, but he told them he was going to be king over them. And they said, no way, we don't want you as king. And they kicked him out. Does that sound familiar? Because that's what they did to Yeshua. And they thought he was dead, just like they think Yeshua is dead. But really, Joseph became a king, or a second in command, actually, over a Gentile nation, which was Egypt. And that's exactly what happened with Jesus, right? Like, they thought he was dead, they thought they kicked him out and they killed him, but really he is now king and Lord over a Gentile nation. But in the end, the 12 tribes of Israel, had to come to him, and when they saw him, he looked like an Egyptian. They didn't recognize him. I want you to hear this. They didn't recognize him. When the Jewish people, the tribes, the leaders of the tribes, the sons of Jacob, were hungry and thirsty, and they came to him, they didn't recognize him. They didn't know who he was. They thought he was an Egyptian. They didn't know that he was the brother. But once they had their reconciliation and Joseph took off his Egyptian garments, he took off everything that made him look Egyptian, and he revealed himself to his Jewish brothers, and he said, I am Joseph. I believe that this is what's happening with Jesus. He's taking off the garments, the mask that makes him look kind of like an Egyptian, foreign to the Jewish people. And he's going to take all of it off, and he's going to reveal himself to his brothers and say, I am Yeshua. And I believe that that is what's happening. And I pray that this simple little class that's going to be on a simple little playlist on simple little YouTube just adds a little bit to what God is, a little seed to what God is doing, to take the mask off of Yeshua, to take the mask off of Jesus, so my people, so the Jewish people can recognize him as their brother and who he really, really is. So let us come to the first objection to Jesus. Let me do a just quick spot check on social media. I do see excellent connection on YouTube. You know, in the previous class I did have some internet connections and problems, and just want to make sure it's not happening right now. So everything looks like it's going okay. So we're going to continue on to the first Jewish objection to Jesus. And, well, this one I'm going to talk about tonight is a little bit of a challenging one. It's not a theological objection. So in a way, you can almost put your Bibles down for this one. It's more of a cultural and historical objection. It's one that is very sensitive to talk about. It can cause a reaction, especially from a Christian audience. It can cause a defensive reaction or an offensive reaction or some sort of visceral reaction. So let's just take a step back, and I want to present something in an absolute spirit of humility and a spirit of love, just so we could all be on the same page. This class is called Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus, and if we don't hit this Jewish objection to Jesus, we're not being truthful and thorough in tackling these issues. So the first Jewish objection to Jesus that I want to talk about is the objection that Christianity is anti-Semitic. So Christianity is anti-Semitic. Now, let me just caveat this. I do not believe that Christianity is anti-Semitic. I am not calling anybody here an anti-Semite. I'm not labeling anyone. But we need to talk about this difficult topic because I need to be honest with you that this is one of the primary challenges and blockages that Jewish people have to accepting Jesus, that historical Christianity, at least, at times has been an anti-Semitic, murderous force to the Jewish people. And many Jewish people in history have died at the hands of Christians with swords. They know this, and this mindset has gotten into Judaism, especially this generation. We're only 2 generations or so out of the Holocaust, and there's a lot of sensitivity about anti-Semitism, and there's a strong feeling that if a Jewish person accepts Jesus, they're siding with the enemy. So I need to be honest and raw and candid, but loving and delicate about this subject. I don't mean to offend anyone. And I understand that these things can be offensive and they can be divisive. So I pray that it is not. To use a simple example in modern times, and I'm no expert in critical race theory. There's something that's out there called critical race theory. I'm absolutely no expert at it, but I think at a high level, at a macro level, what it is that the proponents of CRT, critical race theory, believe that there's value in exposing and talking about and teaching the racist, not only roots of America, but where racism still exists in America, and the thought that only by talking about it and only by shining a light on it are we going to get past it. That's what the proponents of critical race theory think. Of course, the opponents have an alternate view, and they believe the opponents of critical race theory believe that it unfairly and incorrectly depicts present-day America as racist, and it's not letting us move past race, our legitimately racist past in America by just inserting racist motives into practically everything, and they view it as more divisive than healing. So I don't know much about critical race theory, CRT, but honestly, I use that as an analogy because kind of what I'm bringing forward here is another version of CRT, and I'm coining this myself, critical religious theory. Critical religious theory, that I think there is value in looking at the times that Christianity as an entity, as a world religion, was anti-Semitic, not to label anybody as currently anti-Semitic, not to label Christianity altogether, not to implicate the many just because of the bad works of a few, right? But to be just honest about some of the things that's happened over the last 2,000 years and how Judaism was treated, especially in Christian countries, it needs to be spoken about. And I do believe that if we have an understanding of this, we can have empathy and we can have compassion to Jewish people who do struggle with that. I'm telling you the truth that it's, back in the first century, Jewish people maybe struggled with Jesus being the Messiah. They stumbled over the cross, the message of the cross. I tell you, these days, a lot of Jewish people, they don't object to Jesus as much as they do Christianity. And one of the things that they object to with Christianity is its anti-Semitic roots. How can he be the Messiah when his followers kill us? Right? This is a legitimate thing that a Jewish person will think and bring forth. And when they're presented with the love of Yeshua and the gospel message, this is something that's there. I'm telling you, it's there. I'm telling you as a Jew, it's there. It was in me. It's in my family. It's in my generations. I'm telling you, it's there. And we just need to deal with it. So it's both the Protestant Christian church, it's the Catholic Church history. There has been anti-Semitism. We do need to expose this, and we just need to talk about it with gentleness, but with also honesty. So let's just shine a light on these things. I think understanding this history can help to bring that reconciliation and understanding. So let's just take a look at it a little bit. So I don't want to spend so much time on all the examples, but I do want to, speak about some of the examples that's happened from the time of Yeshua, from the time of Jesus unto now, because it's in kind of the soul and the psyche of Jewish people. This is answering Jewish objections to Jesus. This is objection number one. I'm telling you, it is. We have to talk about it. One of my good friends, his name is Dave. He lives in New Jersey. And he has a quote. He tells me this all the time. He says, there are two types of people in the world. There are Jews, and there are those who hate Jews. And that's how he feels. That's how he feels legitimately. And that sentiment, that mindset is there because of the anti-Semitism that has been that they've dealt with often at the hands of Christians, sadly. So let's just go through this. Again, this is not to implicate anyone, but this is just to shine a light on some of the history. I would say that the tearing apart of, or let me put it this way, our faith in Yeshua tore down that middle wall of partition, as it says, between Jew and Gentile. That's what the Bible says. It was probably only 100 years later, like in the 2nd century, where that wall of partition started to get built up again, separating Jew and Gentile. We start to see in the 2nd century something called replacement theology, which essentially says that God is done with Israel, and now his blessing is to the church. In fact, if you look at the Old Testament, anytime that he's condemning Israel, he's condemning natural Israel. Anytime he's speaking blessing over Israel, he's blessing the church, right? So the blessing for Israel is all for the church. All the condemnation goes to the Jews and to Israel. We start to see that sentiment as early as the 2nd century. That's like 100 years after the apostles that we read from in the New Testament. That's not a long time. In the 4th century, there was John Chrysostom, who was a church father, a very early church father. He was the Archbishop of Constantinople. This is in the 4th century, so in the late 300s. He wrote 7 sermons called Against the Jews. He called the Jews murderers, destroyers, men possessed by the devil. He said they only know one thing, to satisfy their gullets. They get drunk, they kill and maim one another. He called the synagogue a repair of wild beasts, a domicile of the devil. And he called the Jewish religion a disease. He said he hates the synagogue and he hates Jews. That's in their writings. And he said the Jews are accursed because of their assassination of Christ. And he said Jews will never be saved because their sin is unpardonable. Now that is an unbiblical sentiment, that what the Jewish people's rejection of Jesus is unpardonable. It says in Romans 11 that it was a partial hardening, and it's even temporary in time, because in time all of Israel would be saved. That's what Romans 11 says. So what John Chrysostom said was absolutely a lie. So I just want to bring that forward. Under Emperor Constantine, when Christianity became the formal religion of the Roman Empire, we really see a split. That's where we really see the split between Judaism and Christianity. We actually see it documented when Easter and the celebration of Messiah's resurrection was formally split from Passover. Before then, it was always linked to the Jewish Passover, which is what it should be, because that's when it happened. But that's when we see the split. We see the Hebrew calendar being replaced with the Julian calendar. We see Sunday replacing Saturday as the Sabbath. So these things became formalized under Christian Rome. And in Christian Rome, it became more commonplace for Jews to be deprived of the right to work, to travel, to own property. But this is all very ancient history, and it really reached a crescendo or height with the Crusades, the Christian Crusades. So in the year about 1000, 1100, these Christian European mobs called Crusaders decided to liberate Israel, Jerusalem, and the Holy Land from Muslims. And on their way, when they encountered Jews, the Christ killers — I was called a Christ killer growing up. Many Jewish people were called Christ killers. When the Jews encountered these Crusaders, these militant Christians, the Crusaders gave them this edict that I spoke about earlier in the class: convert or die. Sword to throat, convert or die. And many chose death, it says, with the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, on their lips. In the hands of these Christian crusaders. When they finally reached Jerusalem, they herded Jews into the great synagogue. They burned them alive. And there are some documents — I'm not sure if it's historically accurate — but some documents say that while the crusaders were burning the Jewish people alive in the synagogue, they were singing, "Christ, we adore thee." Again, I'm not exactly sure if that's historically accurate, but it is in some of the writings. In the Middle Ages, from the 12th century to the 16th century, we have something called the Blood Libels. Very, very tragic thing, when all these false allegations were made against Jews that they murder Christian children, and they use Christian children's blood in ritual purposes, like making Passover matzah. And when a Christian child went missing, the Jews were blamed. You know, it's almost a similar thing that we saw, unfortunately, very sadly, with the black community in early America. Like if, let's say, something happened to a white woman or a white child, very often a black person would wrongly be blamed and be persecuted and killed for that. Jewish people experienced the same thing in Europe for centuries. When a Christian child went missing, Jews were blamed and were massacred. They were burned at the stake. Jews were blamed for the plague, the Black Plague, and were massacred for that. Going into the 12th century, we see the Inquisitions, where the church wanted to uncover Jews who converted to Catholicism outwardly, but were still practicing Judaism at home, and to hunt them down and to torture them and to kill them. In 1492, like we in America know 1492, when Christopher Columbus sailed and discovered America, in Judaism, it's actually the year that Jews were expelled from Spain for refusing to be baptized. They were forced out of European countries and forced out of Spain, notably because of their refusal to convert. Martin Luther, the founder of Protestantism, in 1543 wrote concerning the Jews and their lies. He wrote his solutions for the Jewish problem. He wrote that synagogues should be set on fire, homes should be destroyed and burned down, that Jewish prayer books should be destroyed, rabbis should be forbidden to teach under threat of death, travel should be forbidden to all Jews. And this is Martin Luther. This is the founder of Protestantism. There were the European pogroms, which weren't always from Christians, but often they were. These were riots aimed at Jewish villages and just massacring Jews and destroying their villages, oftentimes in the names of Christianity. And now we have the Holocaust. Now, Nazism was absolutely not Christian. Nazis were not Christian. They did not claim to be Christian. But Germany at that time was a Christian nation. They were a Christian nation, and Jewish people know that. They were a Christian nation. It happened under a Christian nation's watch. In fact, one of the sad things, I remember when my wife and I, Sue and I, went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. This was again, like 25 years ago, something like that, over 20 years ago. I don't know if it's the same thing today. I don't know if they changed things, but literally the first exhibit when you walk into the Holocaust Museum, or when we walked into the Holocaust Museum 20 years ago, they show you, this is the Holocaust Museum. This is the culmination of anti-Semitism in Europe. They start with a video about Jesus, right? To make at least a dotted line connection between Jesus and the Holocaust. This is in the mindset of Jewish people. So please forgive me if you feel offended by this, and if you feel that I'm saying, I'm just making blanket statements that Christianity is anti-Semitic. I'm really, really not. I do not believe that Christianity is anti-Semitic. But I do need to share this because these historical events have shaped the way Jewish people view Christians and Christianity, and it needs to be spoken about. It needs to be addressed. This is why I call it, my version, the CRT, critical religious theory. I do think there's benefit in at least understanding the history. Not looking for reparations, not looking for apology. Nobody's looking for anything. Just an understanding of what happened, so you can have empathy. So a Christian can have empathy for what the Jewish people have dealt with, and have love and understanding and compassion. So let's see. So where do we go from here? That was very heavy, and I understand that. And I just want to also say that in much of history, Christian anti-Semitism was the exception and not the rule. I don't want to generalize even historical Christianity as anti-Semitic. There are many instances across history where the dealings between Jews and Christians were actually very favorable. Even Martin Luther, who did write toward the end of his life about the Jews and their lives, most of his life he seemed to encourage kindness towards the Jewish people. And it was only later in life, when he was actually unsuccessful in converting them to Christianity, did he turn against them. For most of his life, he was actually very kind and compassionate to Jewish people. So you can't label a whole community, and you can't label a whole religion just because of the bad, evil actions of a few. So I do want to point that out. So we do have a right, and you as a Christian, you absolutely have a right to defend Christianity, to defend historical Christianity, and all the good it has brought into the world also. Look, in every religion, there are bad characters, right? But I would also be quick in responding to a Jewish person. So in answering the Jewish objections to Jesus, I would also, especially in dealing with this issue, I would also be quick in talking about the Christians who truly lived out the faith. A Jew might bring up the Holocaust, but I would be quick to bring up Corrie ten Boom, who hid many Jews in her home during the Holocaust and was arrested for this and brought into a concentration camp. Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in Israel, has an exhibit exclusively dedicated to righteous Gentiles, or the righteous among the nations. How about they're the ones that exhibited true Christian ideals, and the murderous mobs of the Crusades, or those who said convert or die, those were not real Christians. They were not walking out the faith. Can we all just agree with that? If any historical Christian had anti-Semitic motives or was murdering Jews, they were not following the faith. They may have had the label or the name of Christian. They might have been political, Christians or political Catholics, kind of armed with the governments of Rome. But if they were murdering Jews or expelling Jews from their nations, or forbidding them from this or that, they were not practicing Christianity, right? So we could all agree with that. So I would be very quick to tell a Jewish person that that's how terrible that was. They did not exemplify the actual faith that Jesus and the apostles espoused. The faith that the New Testament provides us and gives us and teaches us is that the Gentiles are grafted in. It says in Romans 11 that some of the branches were broken off, but you, Gentiles, being a wild olive branch, were grafted in among them to become partakers with them. So it's not like the Jews are a whole nother people anyway. You are with them. You are co-partakers of the olive tree with them. You're not meant to look at them, Jewish people, as a separate group. You're meant to look at them as you. You're meant to look at them as your own people, because you are with them. You are co-heirs, it says, with them to the promises of God. That is how you're supposed to look at it. You are grafted in to Israel, to the Jewish people, to the richness of the promises of God. It wasn't a start. Once it becomes a start of a new religion, then it's like us and them. But that was never the intent. It was never the intent of Paul and the apostles to have a religion of Christianity and a religion of Judaism. That was never the intent. It was that Gentiles are welcome into the faith that already existed. It says in Romans 11, verse 18, don't be arrogant towards those branches. But if you are arrogant, remember that it's not you who supports the root, but the root supports you. So Paul is telling Gentiles, like, don't boast. Don't even boast. Don't think you're better than the Jewish people. And remember, the root supports you. You don't support them. So this is what the New Testament teaches. The New Testament teaches that the Jews and the Gentiles are one. Ephesians 2 speaks about the one new man. It speaks about how both groups, it says in verse 14, he himself is our peace, who made both groups into one and broke down the barrier of the dividing wall. There's supposed to be unity with Jew and Gentile. And I would absolutely, as a Christian, I would definitely tell this is what my faith teaches, that I am one, I'm unified with you. With you, we share a belief in God. Yeah, we differ in the Messiah, but I am grafted in to the faith that you hold. It says that he makes the two into one person, establishing peace, that he might reconcile them both into one body, having put to death the hostility. How can the New Testament say that the hostility is put to death, but that there's still hostility towards Jewish people? So the Christians, the Crusaders that were murderous, they did not practice the faith. That is not the faith of Yeshua. That is not the faith of the apostles. John loves, apparently the 3:16 is a really good verse for John. We know the popular John 3:16, for God so loved the world, but also 1 John 3:16 says, we know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers and sisters. So our faith teaches us not to take life, but to lay down our life. And this is a way that we can answer this tough objection from Jewish people about all the anti-Semitism that has taken place. Don't deny it. This is why it's important to at least expose it, right? Don't deny that it happened. Don't be overly defensive. But, and certainly, talk about that this was not always this. It wasn't always this way. And there are many instances in history that Christians treated Jews very well. And you can also bring up the many examples like the Corrie ten Booms and all these other people that truly did exemplify the faith. I mean, Yeshua himself even said that hatred itself is like murder, right? Isn't that what he said? So how can anybody really be murderous if they're truly, truly followers of Yeshua? Love and empathy will go a long way. And it might take a long time, but it will go a long, long way. Amen. So I wanted to share that with you. I spoke about the story of Joseph, how Joseph was concealed, right? He looked like an Egyptian, but he was really the brother of the Jews. He was Jew, but he looked like an Egyptian. And that's how it is with Jesus and the Jews right now. He's actually a Jew underneath it all. He's underneath the pictures, is really a Jew. And in the story of Joseph, he eventually took off his garments, his Egyptian garments, and revealed himself. But what prompted him to take off his Egyptian garments? And it was his brother Judah being willing to lay his life down for his other brother Benjamin. Benjamin was the least of his brothers. Yeshua said, what you do to the least of these, you do unto me. And in that story, Judah was willing to lay his life down for Benjamin. He went to Joseph and said, take me hostage, take me as slave, and let Benjamin go. And it was that act of laying down his life is what prompted Joseph to take off his garments and reveal who he was to the Jewish people, to his brothers. I believe that it is the love and laying down our lives for the Jewish people that will cause Yeshua to take off the garments that make him unrecognizable to the people of Israel, and he will reveal himself to them, and there will be reconciliation. So I do have one other way of dealing with this, and this is more towards the Jewish audience that could be watching this, whether you're watching it live or you're watching it later on YouTube. And this is another hard conversation, and this is something that can get us defensive. So I just want to say this with very, very much love, and this goes to the Jewish audience. Our people, our Jewish people, our people have suffered a lot in the nations, and we know that. We suffered at the hands of those who call themselves Christians. We suffered at the hands of Muslims. We suffered on the hands of Nazis. But all the suffering that our people have endured over the millennia, when we were in the nations, when we were exiled to the nations, all the suffering was actually prophesied in the Bible. It's in the Torah. It's in the Tanakh. It's in the writings of the prophets. The Torah is actually full of blessings and curses, and blessings, what would happen to our people if we kept God's ways, if we kept his Torah well, and curses that would come upon our people if we broke his ways and broke his laws and didn't live godly lives as individuals and as a nation. He lists all these things that would come upon us, and it's very, very explicit that if we sin and if we don't keep his ways and we disobey, he's going to remove us from the land that he gave us as a gift, Israel, and he's going to put us into the nations, and we're going to be persecuted there. So there is another question, and it goes beyond who did the persecuting, whether it was people who called themselves Christians or Muslims or Nazis. The question is, well, why is this happening? And why has this prophecy is being fulfilled? I mean, it's very, very specific in the Bible all throughout that this was going to happen to our people if we sinned. And the Bible story is very consistent from the beginning, right from the Torah, that God rescued us from Egypt, and he brought us first into the wilderness, and he revealed himself to us, to our people, and he showed us his ways, and he gave to us his Torah from Mount Sinai, and he instructed us on how to live a godly life, and charged us to hold and to keep that Torah and to live a godly life. And he told us right from the beginning that we'll be blessed if we do that, and if we spurned his laws, that we'll be punished and we'll be exiled and we'll be persecuted. When we started to sin after the time of Moses, God sent the prophets to us to correct us and to bring us back to the proper walk of faith in him. But our ancestors, our Jewish ancestors, some of them killed those prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, all killed by Jews, by us. So we killed God's messengers. And then the last and final messenger, and all of us know this, all of us Jews know that the final messenger coming to the world, coming to the Jewish people, is the Messiah himself. And he also was killed. So unfortunately and sadly, what was God to do at that point when the final messenger, the Messiah, was killed by our people? God had to keep his side of the covenant that was made with Moses, that if you do these well, I'm going to bless you. But if you don't, I'm going to exile you. I'm going to put you into exile, and you're going to be punished, and you're going to be persecuted. So there was nothing left to do when the Messiah himself was killed, just like the prophets were killed. God had to enact his side of the covenant. But our God is a good God, and he's got some tricks up his sleeve to bring redemption and to bring healing and to bring wholeness. And that very action, the very action that our people did of handing over the Messiah to death, just like a Passover lamb was killed, he was sent off to be killed. Just as our people did that action in and of itself brought atonement to Israel and to the world for those who believe. That is the goodness of God, that our people, our ancestors, were in a sinful place. The rabbis talk about, like, why did this happen? Why were we exiled from Israel? We had the great yeshivas in Israel. We had the great rabbis in Israel in the first century. Why did God do this to us? I mean, the rabbis debate these things. And it talks about the baseless hatred that was in Judaism at the time, which prompted the exile and the destruction of Israel. So at that time, our people put the Messiah to death. But God used that action to bring atonement, that the death of the Messiah brought atonement to all those who believe. And that is a miracle. And that is the goodness of God. And that atonement is available to the whole world. It was available to every Gentile to believe it. And this is how Gentiles came into faith in the God, our God, the same God that came to our people on Mount Sinai and revealed himself to them, to our people, the same God is now the God of all the nations. There are people all around the world carrying their Bibles, which has our Torah, our Jewish writings in their Bible. Why did this happen? Because Yeshua is the Messiah. And the death that we instituted, that we hand them off to Rome to be killed, that action brought atonement for those who believe. And that is the truth for the Gentiles, and it's still the truth for us as Jews, that believing in that death provides atonement for you and me and the whole world. And that's the invitation that is out there by God still. And that is the end of our class. And that is a perfect lead-in to our next class, when we're going to talk about Jewish objection number 2, which is the Christian view of atonement and how forgiveness is granted by God. Jewish people think that the Christians got it all wrong. Jewish people and the counter-missionaries, the anti-missionaries, will say, like, blood atonement is not needed. All you need to do is repent and do good deeds. They'll say that you don't need, there's no such thing, there's no concept of a man dying for us and his blood saving us. All these concepts are foreign to Judaism. They're Christian fabrications. This is what Jewish people say. We're going to dig into that deep, so we're going to go more into these theological discussions starting next week. So I want to thank you for joining. Like I said, this class will be on YouTube. My name is Rabbi Brian Samuel. I'm the rabbi of Mishkan David Messianic Jewish Synagogue in Rhode Island. Feel free to come and visit us any Saturday or watch us online. We live stream now. On Saturdays, we have a lot of things going on during the week. We got Torah studies, we got prayer nights, we got home groups, so we got Hebrew class, we light Shabbat candles together. So we have a lot of activities. Feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in any of those. They're all available virtually. And thank you again for joining. I really appreciate all your attendance. I look forward to seeing all your comments. And mark your calendars, okay? Don't rely on Facebook to remind you. The next class will be on Tuesday, March 15th at 7 o'clock, where we're going to dig into the Jewish objection of the Christian view of forgiveness and atonement. And does the Christian view, does the view that Yeshua's death provides atonement to the world, is that compatible with Jewish thought? I'll give you the answer in advance. It is. All right, guys. I will see you next week. Look forward to seeing your comments. Reach out to me, rabbi@messianicri.com, or on this Facebook page. All right, y'all. Have a great night. I'm going to end the live stream, and I will talk to you all